I just happen to have my computer signed by Steve Wozniak, who invented the Apple computer, for those of you who didn't know that. Can you imagine a little Salt Lake City company being able to attract the talent of a Steve Wozniak? That was kind of a crazy occurrence. Today, as we go through the lecture, I'll share with you how that happened. But first of all, I see the logo here, David Bradford, the Bottle Cap Kid. Let me explain that a little bit. You have all played with bottle caps, or at least snapped them off soda pop. And but in the early 50s, 1956, 1957, we loved bottle caps. You don't have an appreciation for this, but World War II had just closed in 1945. And even in the decade after World War II, we were still caught up with what happened during the Second World War. And so we envisioned armies, but armies of bottle caps. And that's how we built our armies, and we played with them. Let me explain a little bit more. So what we would do is we would go to the local market, and we would find bottle caps, and we'd find them on the streets. We'd find them anywhere we could go. And we treasured these bottle caps. And there was orange Nesbitt's, there was Hires Root Beer, there was Royal Crown Cola. There was all sorts of different bottle caps. I really loved the Royal Crown Cola bottle cap the best. That was my favorite. But how I got the name the Bottle Cap Kid, I went over and I spoke to a convention last summer. In fact, it was my 40th wedding anniversary, so that was an easy date to remember. My wife and I had met at BYU in the early 70s, married in 1973, and 40 years later, we found ourselves August 24th, 2013, in the south of England, speaking to a group about this size, probably 300, 350 students in the south of England. My sister, who was on a mission over there, had invited us to go speak. I was the keynote speaker for the religious conference that they had there. My part was on the business side. And so I had sent my sister the bio, and she'd known many of the things that I'd done. And just as Chase wrapped through the various things that I accomplished, I thought my sister was going to get up there and say similar things. Hired Wozniak, Executive of the Year, yada, yada, yada. Instead, my sister is a few years older than me, got up, and she paused. And she got emotional before she even started to speak. And I was wondering, gosh, what's going to come out of her mouth next? And she says, let me just introduce to you my brother, David Bradford, the Bottle Cap Kid. And I looked and, you know, I got teary-eyed. And I mean, it was like we kind of were reliving that little part of our growing up together in Burbank, California in the 50s. And as I explained, we played these bottle cap wars. And I stole a vacuum cleaner hose, metal one, from my mother. And we would take these marbles, and we would take the bottle caps, and we would kind of push down on the side so they would stand up. And so then we would roll these marbles down the vacuum tubes, and we'd erect these barricades around the bottle caps, trying to protect our various armies. And the marbles would roll down, and they would crash into the wooden barricades and knock over some of the things, and we would count how many people went down and so forth. So that was our bottle cap wars. So that's how I got the name the Bottle Cap Kid. Now, the Bottle Cap Kid, the lessons I learned from those bottle caps and the place that I got them, Joe's Market, still are with me today. And I'm going to talk about 6 principles. I call them my UP principles. And we'll go through them today a little bit. So I've explained a little bit on how I became the Bottle Cap Kid, and we'll talk about the 6 UP principles. But Joe's Market was down around the corner from our home in Burbank. I was just there about 4 months ago. Joe's Market is no longer there. It's a hot dog and hamburger stand and so forth. But my recollections are pretty vivid. We'd walk into Joe's Market, and there was this old grizzled man who loved to listen to Italian opera. And we would walk into his store, and one day you know, as I said, we were picking up these bottle caps from the streets and so forth. But one day, I got the courage to stand up to Joe. And as you would walk into Joe's market, there was this red bottle or soda pop dispenser that sat about 3 feet off the ground. And it was filled with ice and all sorts of soda pop. And so we would walk in to the store, and attached to the red bottle cap, or the dispenser for the soda pop, was a bottle cap catcher. So you'd buy your soda pop, Joe would wipe off your soda pop, all the ice off, he'd snap off the bottle cap into the catcher. That was the thing that I wanted most. You know, I could spend weeks looking for bottle caps on the street, but if I could just get a hold of that bottle cap catcher. So finally I had the courage to stand up to Joe, this big Italian man, and say, can I have those bottle caps? You know, and he looked a little concerned initially, and then he said, sure. And so every week I'd come in with my little brown sack and ask him to fill it up with the bottle caps that he had collected. He won because he didn't have to take them out to the trash, and I won because I was able to take those bottle caps home and play bottle cap wars. So that's a little bit about the bottle caps and so forth. So the basic 6 principles I'm going to go through today, let's start with startup, right? In order to succeed in business, I believe that the most essential thing you have to have is connections. I remember when I was attending Brigham Young University back in 1976, and I was just finishing the new law school. I was in the second graduating class at the BYU Law School. And I had a young family, 3 children. My wife and I didn't have money. Neither one of us got anything paid for in school. We worked our way through college. And so as we did so, you know, I had this great weight on my shoulders to provide for my family. And the thing that was most valued at the end of our second year of law school is a law clerkship, right? And so if you can get in that law clerkship after your second year of law school, it will oftentimes lead to a full-time position in the law firm. And that's the thing that I wanted desperately, to get a full-time position so I could provide for my family. So what I did is we typed out like 50 resumes and on carbon paper. We sent out letters to law firms all over Southern California. And you know how many responses I got back? I got back 3 responses. It was better than none, but I felt like I was the most least connected guy in the universe. I'd grown up in a little small town in Montana. After we lived in Burbank till I was 10, we moved to Montana when I was 10. And from the time I was 10 until I graduated from high school, we lived in Montana. I graduated from with a class of 42 kids in Red Lodge, Montana. Has anyone ever been to Red Lodge? Yeah, it's a small town. No street lights that I recall, and 13 bars on the main street. Pretty rough and tumble Montana town. But I didn't know a lawyer in that city. I didn't know a lawyer when I was in law school. And so graduating, I was doing really well in law school, and I was always told, if you finish in the top 25% of your class, you'll get a job, you'll have a job. That wasn't necessarily true. It was the kids that were connected to lawyers in the industry that were getting all the jobs. I saw guys finishing in the bottom 25% of our class. They had jobs. I didn't have jobs. And I was commiserating with my mother, Kay Bradford, one day, and I said, Mom, I'm so frustrated. I don't have a job upon graduation. I don't have a law clerkship. I don't know what I'm going to do. Help me. And she says, David, don't you remember what I've always told you? It's not what you know, it's who you know. And at that time, and you've heard that phrase, but at that time in my life, it struck me very powerfully. I understood the value of connections, and I determined from that day forward that I was going to develop deep, permanent, and lasting relationships in my business career that would benefit me for the next 40 years of my life. And so these principles I'm going to talk about today, start up, show up, follow up, stand up, link up, etc., scale up, are all about connecting with people. You'll hear the term networking used from time to time, right? I'm a big believer in networking. It's time we kind of said, that's not a four-letter word. Networking contains the word work in it. It's forming a network of people, but it takes a lot of work to do that. Don't ever minimize the value of creating a network. Think about creating your own personal board of directors. All these companies that you'll hear from today and, in previous lectures, they form companies and they have this board of directors. Well, if a board of directors is valuable to a company, how much more valuable to you as an individual, right? So go out, build those relationships, and you do it first and foremost by by giving up. Here today, you're going to meet somebody. You come to these conferences, you come to these classes, you'll go to networking events and whatnot, and you'll meet somebody. Your first thought needs to be, how can I help that individual? Let's see, I just met you. Stand on up. Green shirt up here. And your first name was?
Natalie.
Natalie. And Natalie's from Manti, Utah. And I've learned already that her father is a public school teacher. Correct? Correct. Great. But not in the turkey industry, because Manti's like the world capital of the turkey industry with Norbest and some of the other big ones there. Now, how can I help you in your life? Right now, think of ways. What is it that you need in your life from a business perspective, from any perspective? What is it that I can help you with? Do you need a job?
I need knowledge, I guess.
You need a knowledge?
Yeah,
You need knowledge?
I need to learn from you today.
Okay, she needs knowledge. Knowledge is good, Natalie. And what I'm saying to you is the knowledge I'm trying to convey to you today, and you can have a seat, is that if you connect with people and you form a team, who's seen the Lego movie? Right? What's the song everybody's saying? Everybody's awesome, right? And if we're a team, what happens? Everything is cool, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, is you form a team around you, and the way you do it is to think first of the other person. What is it that I can help that person with? How did I get to become CEO of Fusion.io, the world's most innovative company? Seriously? Salt Lake City-based, world's most innovative company. Here's how it happened. And this goes to the principle of starting up your network by, first and foremost, think of giving before getting. So I was contacted in 2000 or 2005, like that, by a fellow by the name of Don. Don had from Stanford University. And he moved to Utah with his wife because she got admitted to the medical school at the University of Utah. And he reached out to me as one of those people in Utah that's connected to the venture capital community. And he says, I'd love to take you to lunch. And so, sounded like an intriguing fellow, so I went to lunch with Don. He told me about what he was up to, and he says, I really need to be connected to the venture capital community here in the state of Utah. Can you help me? I said, sure, I know all the VCs. I'd be happy to take you around. And so we set aside a day about a week later, and I made some calls and set up a series of meetings for Don here in the state of Utah. And we went around to 3 venture capital funds in the morning and 1 in the early afternoon. And then I happened to have a meeting with John Huntsman Jr., the governor then of the state of Utah, in the afternoon. I'd actually served John as kind of general counsel to his transition committee. And so I set up a meeting with John, and I said, hey, Don, we've had a good day. Why don't you accompany me, and we'll introduce you to the governor. He was thrilled. It was great. So we went up there, we met the governor, had a nice conversation. Don went away, and I didn't hear from Don for at least 3 years. And I didn't wasn't even thinking, oh, I've got to hear back from Don, I did him this favor, et cetera, et cetera. That was not my mindset. It was just a nice guy that had some real skills and a value that he could bring to the state of Utah. So in early 2008, I'm sitting around and I get a call from Don. And Don says, I found it. I says, what did you find? He says, I found this great technology company in Salt Lake City. I'd love you to be a part. Will you come chair our advisory board? I says, well, let me do my due diligence and so forth. So I went and met with the founders up in Salt Lake City, and we had a good interaction. Long story short, I became chairman of the advisory board. I later became CEO of the company. The point is, there is a law of reciprocity in the universe. If you give first, there's an intuitive reaction on the part of people that are on the other side of that transaction that they are going to want to give back. It doesn't always happen, not 100% of the time, but oftentimes it does. And if you'll give first with no thought of getting first, then your life will be blessed in ways that you cannot foresee. Never underestimate the value of who might impact your life. I'm looking up here at a fellow with a pink shirt on. Kind of looks like Eric Mika. What's your first name? Hunter. Where are you from? New Jersey. What part? Okay. Good, good. And what do your folks do back there?
My dad works at Bank of New York.
Yeah, what does he do with Bank of America?
Bank of New York.
Oh, Bank of New York.
He's
Manager out there of some sort. That's great. And so how did you come from there to come here? Went to BYU, so it was natural follow-on, etc. Now, listen, in just 2 minutes, I've learned a little bit about Hunter and what his story is, etc. Be curious about other people. That's how people go, man, how do I get to network with people, etc. You ask questions. You be curious. ABC, always be curious. And so that's kind of how you start up that network. Be curious, begin to give with no thought of getting. The second principle that I'll talk about today is to show up in life. I'm fond of saying that the best 2 jobs I ever got, I simply showed up for. In fact, today I was interviewed by a video company that is putting together a video for, I think it's called Pillar of Utah, something like that. It's an event on March 25th or 26th where they're honoring Ray Norda, who was the CEO of Novell for 12 years and who really kind of drove Novell to some big early success. And so I was interviewed, and they asked me, well, how did you get to meet Ray Norda? So here's the story. One day in September of, it was actually September 15 of 1985, unfortunately my father passed away. He was on a cruise with my mother off the coast of Alaska and had a heart attack and died. It happened to be her birthday. She woke up the morning of September 15th, her birthday, and her husband was dead. But you know what? In life, you never know what's going to trigger some great things. And for me, in my life, that was exactly, looking back, the perfect scenario for me, because I came and visited my sisters who were up in the state of Utah. I was living in Southern California at the time. I was a lawyer in the computer industry. And so I came up to settle some things with the estate. As I'm driving down Interstate 15 from Salt Lake to Orem, I was going to get off at Orem Center Street. I looked off the side of the freeway and I saw a big sign that said Novell. Now in my mind, Novell was a Silicon Valley-based company. It was a hot company in the mid-'80s. We'd just come out of the era of the mainframe computers into the super mini computers with companies like Prime Computer and DEC and Data General. And now we were moving to local area networks. IBM in 1980-81 had invented their personal computer. And now you needed to find a way to connect those personal computers together so they could share common disk files, so they could share storage, etc. And so Novell invented the NetWare operating system, and that was the operating system that permitted the sharing of data on two personal computers. That's what Novell was all about, and became the world leader in that. So I was very excited about Novell, and again, didn't know they were based in Utah. But so I'm driving, I passed 8th North in Orem where I saw the sign. I get to Orem Center Street, and I go, you know what? Maybe there's something back there for me, right? So I get off the freeway at Center Street, I do a U-turn, I go back north, I guess, toward 8th North. I get off at 8th North, went over to the Novell headquarters, and I walked in. Uninvited, I just walked in. I wanted to see what was going on. And I walked up to the receptionist, Carol Carlson, still a dear friend to this day, and I introduced myself. I says, I'm David Bradford. I'm here to meet with the president of the company. She looked at me kind of funny. Did you have an appointment? I said, no. I says, but I've been in the computer industry a few years, heard a lot of great things about Novell, and would love to meet the president. And she says, well, let me go see if Mr. Nord is here. So she walked back to find Mr. Norda. And remember, I was a lawyer in the computer industry. And now I'm sitting on a chair in the, do you know where the Boy Scout of America district offices are? A few of you maybe. They're off 8th North in Orem. It's the same building that Novell was in at that time. And so it's got a circular entry area. And so I sat down, and I'm looking around this circular area, and I see a sign on the wall over there. I walked over, and it said, job board. And it said, shipping and receiving clerk, sales, marketing specialist, support tech, corporate legal counsel. It had my name on it. Essentially, that was the job I was looking for. It was the next natural step in my progression as a lawyer. Now, I hate to think what would have happened had I not taken the time that day. I could have just brushed by that Novell sign and kept going, down to Provo where I was going to visit my sister. Instead, I took action. I showed up that day. I walked in, made my presence felt. Mr. Norda walked out and says, what were you here to see me about? And I said, oh, that job over there, corporate legal counsel, I'm here to interview for that. He brought me back to his offices. 2 weeks later, I moved my family to Utah. I became the corporate legal counsel for Novell. Show up in life, right? Let's see here. There we go. Follow up. Follow up. This is a lost art, students. Follow up. When you connect with somebody, or you meet them at a conference or convention, etc., follow up and do it within 24 hours. I hate to think the number of people that I have met that fail to follow up immediately, right? And after 48 hours, 72 hours, a week goes by, you forget about people. I get emails weeks later saying, hey, we met at somewhere, and you talked about XYZ, and I'm doing this, and I came up and shook your hand after, and we chatted about it, etc. And I go, I just don't remember that person, right? You got to follow up, and you got to do it in a personal way. I want everybody in this room to go out tonight. You don't have to. But to my website, davidbradford.com, you'll see a free book out there. It's a free ebook. It's 101 tips for creating permanent, powerful, and personal business relationships. You can, etc. Also, go out and link in with me. Send me a note. Hey, heard your lecture today at BYU. This is the thing that I really liked about what you had to say. I was the guy in the 16th row that wore the pink shirt. My name's Hunter. I'm from New Jersey. I'm Natalie. I'm from Manti, Utah. I'm Bryson. I gave a little presentation. Make it personal so that I somehow remember you. I'm not going to remember all of you, but LinkedIn is a powerful tool, and I encourage everybody here to get on it, utilize it, and build your network around it, and to follow up. Let me tell you about a follow-up story. So, again, remember, in the spring of 2008, I got introduced to Fusion.io. I became official chairman of the advisory board June 1, 2008. A couple of months prior to that, my daughter had given birth to a new baby. His name's Moti. I was just with Moti yesterday. He's 5 years old, vibrant little kid. Took him to the Lego movie and enjoyed that with he and a number of our other grandchildren. So when Moti was born, Dr. Tom Judd said to me, who was the delivering doctor, "Hey, Dave," birth was over, and they cleaned stuff up, and he says, "Can I take you to breakfast?" I said, "Sure, Tom. Be happy to go to breakfast with you." And so we go to breakfast, and he says, my son-in-law, his name's Brian Lebrecht. He lives in Southern California, but he's moving to Utah. And he needs to make some connections in the state of Utah. Can you help him? I says, "Well, Tom, I'd be happy to. Let me know when he's going to be in town next. Maybe we can go to lunch, and we'll talk about some things." So sure enough, I go to lunch with Brian Lebrecht. I followed up for Tom and showed up for the lunch with Brian. We have a nice conversation. He's a very pleasant guy. I was pretty impressed with him, impressed with his knowledge of the law, the area of practice that he wanted to go into. And he asked me for my recommendations on how to get clients in the state of Utah. I says, "Well, you got to be out there. You got to be seen. You got to be seen as an expert in your area." He says, "Well, how do I do that?" And I said, "Well, join some community associations and so forth." So Brian does. He calls me up a couple of months later and he says, "Dave, I'm now chairman of the Speakers Bureau for the Utah Bar Association." And I says, "Congratulations, Brian." He says, "Will you do me a favor?" And I says, "What's that?" And he says, "Will you come speak at the annual meeting of the Utah Bar Association?" I says, "Well, where is that?" He says, "It's in Sun Valley, Idaho." I says, "What's the Utah Bar Association doing in Idaho?" He says, "I don't know. Don't go there. I think they should be doing it in Utah, but, So I Google Maps it. I find out it's a good 5.5, 6-hour drive one way from Provo, Utah, to get up to Sun Valley, Idaho. And he says, "Will you come speak? And here's the date. It's July 18th, and, here's the topic we'd love you to speak on." And I said, "Brian, okay, for you, I'll do it. I'll come." Right. So I know this story's getting a little attenuated, but it has a point to it. And so I go up. I do my speaking engagement. Afterwards, I'm talking to a young lawyer who'd come up and he asked me some questions. And he said, he asked me a few questions about my speech. And so I was visiting with him about that. And I looked down at a piano bench. Something, I don't know, got it? Yeah, there you go. Talking to him like this. And I looked down at the piano bench. And on the piano bench, there was a little white sheet of paper. And it says, "Keynote speaker, Utah Annual Bar Meeting, Steve Wozniak." Now, for me, the founder of Apple, speaking at the Utah Bar Association, was pretty cool. And I said, "You know what? I can go play golf," which I love. I won the Utah State Senior Amateur Championship several years ago in my spare time. And but I love golf. I love to play golf, and so I'd plan to go up, give my speech, go out to the golf course, enjoy an afternoon of golf. But folks, sometimes little decisions that you make in life can have a massive impact. And that day, I decided to stay and to hear Steve Wozniak speak. And so I came to his speech, and I did what Max. That's what Max did. I sat in the front row that day. Because, hey, if I'm going to be there, I might as well be there full out and listen to Mr. Wozniak speak. And I happened to sit next to, let's see, what was your name? Logan. Max and Logan. Shake hands. Do you two know each other?
Do now.
Okay, you do now. He could change your life. You don't know what blessing Max could bring to you in your life 30 years from now. Hopefully you'll still be friends. Hopefully you'll connect after this. You'll form a deep, powerful, personal relationship. But I reached over and I said, my name's David. And I was sitting next to a young lady. Her name was Julie Roebuck. And I says, hey, Julie, much like I did to Natalie, I said, what's your story? And she said, oh, I'm Steve Wozniak's executive assistant. Well, wasn't that a happy coincidence? And I says, well, gosh, I've been in the computer industry X number of years, and I'm doing this with Fusion.io, and I've done this at Novell, et cetera. Oh, Steve would love to meet you. He knows all about the history of Novell and so forth. Would you have a moment to hang around after the speech? And I said, well, sure, and so forth. And sure enough, after the speech, Julie ran up to Mr. Wozniak and says, oh, you got to meet this lawyer here from Utah. He's the one guy in the room that knows a little bit about the computer industry. And so she introduces me nicely, and we shake hands, and he hands me his business card. Let's see if I can dig this out. Yeah, it's always easy to find, right? He hands me this metal business card. Doesn't sound like a normal card, does it? What does that feel like to you? Metal, right? And it's really cool because you can see here that he has in digital code his phone number, 408-888-888. That's Wozniak's personal phone number. It's on his card here if you want to call him. Please don't. But he's a great guy, by the way. And so he hands me his business card. He says, oh, email me about what you're doing. So that was the point of follow-up. I get in my car. I could have gone and played golf, but I didn't. I drove the 6 hours to Provo, and I was just kind of blown away by this meeting with Woz. By the way, if you're ever in San Jose, there's a street called Woz Way. It's great in downtown San Jose. You want to have a street named after you. That's a cool thing. So I get home, and I construct this email, and I make it a personal email. I've heard a lot about you. We have XYZ mutual friends, et cetera, et cetera. And I says, would you consider joining the Fusion.io advisory board? Now, can you imagine how many times a day and in a week Wozniak is invited to invest or get involved in something? Well, I was shocked. He followed up. Great business professionals followed up. He followed up within 24 hours with a very nice note saying, I would be honored to be on your advisory board. That was an exciting day for me. And then I introduced him to some of the other people in the organization. He hit it off with the techs. And then a couple of months later, he sends me a follow-on email that says, you know, I'm so in love with this technology. Is there a way I can get more involved in Fusion.io? This from the inventor of, I see all the Macs out there, right? It's kind of crazy. And I said, sure. He became our chief scientist. I became CEO of Fusion.io. He worked for me as chief scientist, and it was great. But it all happened because I followed up. Sometimes in life we think, oh, it's just going to happen. We just let it go. No, you've got to stand up, you've got to show up, you've got to follow up to be successful in business and life. My next point is to stand up, right? To me, that is credibility. Your reputation means everything. Max, Natalie, Bryson, Hunter, never do anything in your personal or professional life that is going to cause people to doubt your integrity as an individual. In this world of social media, everything's exacerbated, everything's accentuated, right? If you do something, it's going to be found out on social media, right? And even when you haven't done something purposeful, your reputation can be damaged much more rapidly than it could be before. Think of all the tweets that go out there that has absolutely destroyed executives' lives, right? And so think about the impact and the import of your reputation. Quick story about that. John Huntsman Sr., the father of John Huntsman Jr., our former governor, John Huntsman Sr. Is just a great man and was the founder and the driver of Huntsman Chemical Corporation. Huntsman Chemical Corporation at one point was the world's largest privately held chemical company. John ran that, did an absolutely fantastic job. At one point in his progress in that company, he was looking at spinning out one of the divisions of the company. And that division was doing, I don't know, 20 million in revenue or something like that. And he met with the company, and there was a buyer for that division. And they shook hands. What's your name, by the way? Kevin? Nice to meet you, Kevin. What's your story?
Business major, entrepreneur, family.
Good. Okay, and you love your Mac. Good. And so shook hands just like that with the gentleman and said, $53 million. That's the deal. Okay, so the buyer was going to buy this division for $53 million. But between initial handshake and signing of contracts, something happens called due diligence. And a series of lawyers get involved, and papers are exchanged, and mutual non-disclosures and so forth. And so between the signing of the initial contract, letter of intent if you will, and the actual closing of the deal, sometimes can take as many as 6 to 9 months, right? And a lot of times things can happen in the interim that can have a major impact on that contract. Well, in this case, something happened that really inured to the benefit of the buyer of this business. Huntsman's division really took off. Sales doubled over this 6-month period, et cetera, et cetera. The company became, the division that he was selling, actually became worth something more like $250 million. Now, most people, and it was built into the contract, would be able to go back and say, okay, things have changed. The basis upon which we did our deal 6 months ago have changed. We need to get back together, renegotiate that price. I still want to get the deal done, et cetera. And I'm sure the buyer in this case fully expected that to take place. Instead, John Huntsman did something really significant. He said, we signed a deal for $53 million. We shook hands on the deal at $53 million. $53 million it is. You've got the company. He closed the transaction when he had a perfect legal right to go back and renegotiate it. That's a man with integrity. That's a man who established a reputation. In your life, you all want to behave in a powerful way so as to send a message, an aura around you, that you are going to do the right thing in all circumstances. That's what I'm talking about, standing up. I've been blessed in my life. I'm writing a book now called Up Your Game. He mentioned it. 6 timeless principles for networking your way to the top. I've gone out just in the last week and asked for endorsements from a variety of people. I've been blessed to get responses back just rapidly saying, be happy to endorse your book. Got one from Scott McNeely yesterday. Scott McNeely was the founder and CEO's son, worth billions of dollars. Great guy, one of the icons of the computer age. He's endorsing the book. Larry Sonsini, the most prominent securities lawyer in America, sent me a note yesterday saying, I'd be happy to endorse your book, etc. These are endorsements that don't come to people on a normal basis. They have been established because I have a 35-year track record. And so my point is to you today, you never know where you're going to be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, etc. You've got to establish and build that reputation. So when you need to reach out to other people and ask them to connect with you or do something, that your reputation goes before you. Right? So that's what I mean by stand up. The next principle I like to talk about is to link up. And by the way, let's do a time check here. Where are we? 4 minutes left. Wow. So let's see. Let's reset the format. So I have 4 minutes. Will it be 4:30?
Yeah, it'll be 4:20.
4:20. And then do we do Q&A? Okay. So can I eat into the Q&A a little bit, or?
Yeah, if everyone, at 4:20 class ends, so
Okay. Okay, I did not know that. At 4:20 class is over.
I'm fine with going longer, but
Right, okay. So, I'm sorry. Let me give you the last two principles quickly. Then if you want to leave, great. We'll take a little pause, and then for those who want to stay around and ask questions, I'm happy to respond to questions. We can either do it individually, or you can remain in your seats and we'll raise hands so that everybody can benefit by the Q&A. How does that sound?
that's in room 710, so we'll go upstairs.
I'm totally confused. Okay, so we're done in 3 minutes now. I'm eating up my time, and then we'll go upstairs, and then we'll do the Q&A. Okay, got it. You're all invited to the Q&A. How big's that room? Probably seats about 3 people. No, it's all right. Okay, link up. Link up in a personal way. Remember I talked about following up? You want to link and expand your network. I now have over 11,000 people in LinkedIn. I'm maxed out on Facebook at 5,000. I'm the one CEO in America who's actually walked the walk and, talked the talk and walked the walk when it comes to social media. I hired my senior vice president of global sales at Fusion.io from a little LinkedIn message that I sent out. I hired my chief financial officer from a Facebook post that I made, etc. Social media today gives you a great opportunity like never before to connect with in powerful ways. I connected with Malcolm Gladwell. Who knows who Malcolm Gladwell is? Okay. What are some of the books he authored? Outliers, Tipping Points, Blink. David and Goliath is his latest book. That's a game changer for me, David and Goliath. I read it about 10 days ago. Fantastic book. I met Malcolm, just quickly. The next day I followed up with him. But before I followed up, I did a little research on Malcolm. And I found out that Malcolm Gladwell, as a 15-year-old kid in high school in Canada, ran the mile. We're all, who's a track guy in here? Okay, young lady, stand up. Do you run distance or sprints? Distance. What's your best mile time? 4:58. 4:58. Wow. I'm so embarrassed. No, that's great. And are you on the BYU track team?
I used to be.
You used to be. Okay.
I was injured and had a mission, so.
Injured, had a mission. You're doing great things. God will bless you. 4:58. Okay. What's your first name?
Megan.
Megan, be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll watch for you. That's awesome. You can sit down now. What would be considered for a 15-year-old high school kid a good mile time?
For a guy?
For a guy. In high school, 15, sophomore.
Sophomore? Or like under 5 for sure.
Under 5 for sure. 4:45, etc. Malcolm Gladwell ran the mile run in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. As a 15-year-old high school kid. I don't think many people knew that. I did the research. I sent Malcolm a nice email after I met him at an event in Sundance and said, hey, I understand now why you were successful. And I even attached a photograph of him breaking the tape as a high school student, setting the Canadian high school mile record as a kid. The point is, be personal as you linked in with people. The final thing is to scale up. Scaling up your network takes hard work. Remember the word networking, there's a word work in that word. It takes time. You got to set aside the time and effort. I do it every day. I spend about an hour on LinkedIn, Facebook, connecting with people, etc. And to scale up and build that network to where it becomes a real big blessing in your life, it takes hard work, time, scale up your network. Thank you very much. We'll wrap it up there.